Good evening, my dear friends. Tonight I want to speak to you of a heartbreak so particular, so quiet, and so seldom named by any teacher of the law, that I am almost certain there are souls listening to me tonight who have lived through it and never once heard it described. It is the heartbreak of having received and then having lost, of having assumed and persisted and watched the manifestation appear at last in the outer world, only to watch it dissolve again within days or weeks, as though it had been a kind of beautiful and cruel dream. Lean closer, my friends. I want to tell you why this happens, and more importantly, I want to tell you how it need never happen to you again. There is a soul in this great city tonight, sitting at his kitchen table in the dimming light of the late afternoon, who has lived through exactly this experience. 3 weeks ago, a long-awaited offer arrived in his life. He had been assuming it for nearly half a year. He had felt the wish fulfilled. He had heard the imaginal conversation. He had gone to sleep many nights in the warmth of its having come to pass. And then, on a Tuesday morning that began like any other, the telephone rang and the offer was extended to him in clear and unambiguous terms. He nearly wept. He believed, for one whole evening, that the law had at last shown him its face. 11 days later, my friends, the offer was withdrawn. There had been, he was told, a complication. The matter could not, after all, proceed. The door which had opened so handsomely closed almost as gently as it had opened. And he sits at his kitchen table now, more shattered than he was before, because before he had only the long ache of not yet having received. Now he has the proof that he received, and the proof that he could not hold it. Now there is a wound under the wound. Now he wonders, in the depths of himself, whether the law gave him the thing only to take it back, or whether, and this is the deeper fear, whether he himself, by some hidden mechanism he does not understand, undid in 11 days what he had built in 6 months. Tonight, my friends, I want to tell him, and through him to tell you what no one has told him. It is the second. It is always the second. The law did not take it back. He returned to the state that did not have it, and the law, which can do nothing but mirrored that older state. The world withdrew the manifestation because the inner man withdrew first. He did not know he was withdrawing. The withdrawal was so quiet, so subtle, so woven into his ordinary habits of feeling, that he never saw it happen. But it happened. And what happened to him, my friends, has happened to nearly every soul who has practiced this law. It is the single most painful and most undertaught lesson in the whole vast garden of imagination. Now, why does this happen? Why should the very soul who assumed the wish, who persisted in the assumption, who finally saw the world conform, why should that soul, in the very hour of his receiving, slip back into the state from which he assumed? It seems impossible. It seems even cruel. But there is a deep reason for it. And tonight I want to unfold that reason with all the care it deserves. When you assume a wish, when you go to sleep, night after night, in the warmth of the wish fulfilled, what is actually being created, my friends, is not the outer event. The outer event is only the echo. What is being created is a new state of consciousness, a new inner posture, a new way of feeling, of carrying yourself through the day, of meeting the morning light. This new state is the manifestation. The outer event, the call, the offer, the open door, the returned lover, the deposited check, is only the visible signature of an inner state that has come into being. The state is the cause. The event is the effect. Now mark this carefully. When the event at last appears in the outer world, the inner state must remain, or the event cannot remain. The two are not separable. The event is the obedient mirror of the state. As long as the state holds, the event holds. The moment the state slips, the event begins, by some quiet law, to slip with it. And here, my friends, is where almost every aspirant fails so quietly that they never see the failure. They have spent 6 months assuming the wish. They have built, in those 6 months, A new inner state at considerable cost, late nights of patient imagination, refusals to listen to the senses, returns to the warmth of the wish fulfilled in the face of much disappointment. The state has been built painstakingly, brick by brick. And then the manifestation appears, and the soul, relieved at last, exhausted from the long building, lays the work down. He thinks the work is over. He thinks the bricks were laid for the sake of the building, and now that the building is here, he need not lay any more bricks. He returns, almost the moment the manifestation arrives, to his old patterns of feeling. He goes back to checking the telephone the way he used to. He resumes his old worries about money in the back of his mind. He drifts, often within 24 hours of the manifestation, back into the inner posture of the soul who did not yet have what he assumed. And the world, my friends, the world which had only just begun to mirror his new state, begins to mirror this old one instead. Within days, the manifestation is dissolving. Within weeks, it is gone. Let me tell you of a young woman I knew in 1952. Catherine was her name, 24 years old, a typist at a publishing house in New York. She had been assuming for nearly 5 months a particular relationship she had longed for with a young man who worked in the same building, but whom she had hardly dared to speak to in the corridor. She had heard me speak in the city the year before, and had begun, quite faithfully, to apply the law. On the 73rd evening of her practice, the young man approached her at a small gathering at which neither of them had quite expected to encounter the other, and within 10 days they were courting. Catherine wrote to me, glowing, that the law had given her everything she had asked. 8 weeks later, my friends, she wrote to me again. The young man had drifted. The courtship had grown distant. He had been polite, attentive, even kind, but the warmth had gone out of his manner. Catherine could not understand. She had received what she had assumed. Why had the world taken it back? I asked her to come and see me when she next had occasion to travel west. She came in the autumn. We sat in a small parlor in a friend's house in Los Angeles, and I asked her one question. I said, Catherine, on the morning after that gathering at which he first approached you, the morning of the very first day of the new state, what did you feel when you woke? She thought for some time. Then she said, slowly, I felt a kind of disbelief. I felt I had to be careful not to ruin it. I felt I had to hold on to him very tightly or he might slip away. I felt, in the truth of myself, as though I had been allowed something I could not quite trust. And there, my friends, was the entire matter. Catherine had built, over 5 months, the inner state of a woman who was loved by this young man. She had built it patiently. She had built it well. And then the manifestation appeared in the outer world. And on the very morning after, within hours of his having approached her at that gathering, she had slipped back into the state of a woman who was not loved by him, but who was anxiously trying to win him. The state of carefulness, the state of holding tightly, the state of one who has been granted something she cannot quite believe. This older state, my friends, was not the state from which she had assumed. The state from which she had assumed was warm, settled, calm, a woman quietly secure in the affection of a man she belonged with. The state to which she returned on the morning after was the very state she had been in before she ever began the work. And the law, which can do nothing but mirror, began at once to mirror this older state. The young man, who responds in his own subconscious to the inner state of the woman he is with, began, almost without knowing why, to drift. The world rebuilt itself around her new old state, and the manifestation, which had been hers in form for 10 days, dissolved. I told Catherine the truth of what had happened, and I told her the cure was not to try to win him back through any new technique. The cure was to return, in her inner life, to the woman she had been in the months of assuming calm, settled, quietly, secure, already loved. Not to perform that woman for him. To be that woman, alone, in her own apartment, before her own evening lamp. To go to sleep each night in the warmth of the assumption, as though the courtship had not yet appeared at all, as though she were still in the long months of inner building. The state had to be rebuilt. And then, and only then, the outer world would rebuild itself to match. Catherine went home. She did this work. Within 3 months, the young man had returned to her more fully than before. They were married within the year. And when she wrote to me afterwards, she said something I have always remembered. She said, "Mr. Goddard, the strangest part of all is that the second time he came back, I did not slip. I had learned. I went to sleep that night in the same state I had gone to sleep in the night before. And I have gone to sleep in that state every night since. Nothing has changed inside me, even though everything has changed outside. And he has not drifted. There, my friends, is the whole secret. Nothing changed inside me, even though everything changed outside. That is the discipline that holds a manifestation. That is the discipline almost no one practices. And it is the discipline that distinguishes a soul who receives once from a soul who keeps what they have received. Now mark this carefully. I want to give you 3 principles about this matter. 3 things you must understand if you are to hold what the law brings you and never again live through the heartbreak of the disappearing manifestation. The first is this: the inner work does not end when the manifestation appears. It begins again in a deeper key, the very morning of its arrival. Most aspirants treat the manifestation as the end of the work. They lay down the imagination, they stop the nightly practice, they cease to live as one who has, because at last they do have. But this is, my friends, the most subtle of all mistakes. The inner state must continue to be tended like a fire to which one returns logs throughout the night. The fire that built the manifestation is the same fire that holds it. Let the fire go out, and the manifestation goes cold. Keep the fire burning quietly, even after the outer event has appeared, and the outer event remains, and indeed deepens, and indeed becomes the foundation upon which still further events are built. The second is this: the moment the manifestation appears is the moment of greatest danger, not the moment of greatest safety. This is, perhaps, the most counterintuitive teaching I will share with you tonight. You would think, would you not, that the danger lies in the long months of waiting, when the senses are still reporting the old world, and the assumption must be held against great resistance. But no, my friends, the danger lies in the morning after. In the long months of waiting, you are vigilant. You know the work has not yet borne fruit. You hold the assumption with care. But on the morning after the event, you relax, you exhale, you think the building is built. And it is in that very exhale, my friends, that the old habits of feeling come rushing back into the room you have just so carefully prepared. The disbelief, the carefulness, the tendency to hold tightly, the half-suspicion that what you have received cannot be trusted. All of it rushes back in the first quiet hour after the news arrives. And unless you know this danger in advance, you will not see it for what it is. You will mistake it for ordinary feeling. And in that mistaking, the manifestation begins to slip away from you. So mark this: when the manifestation appears, do not relax. Not in the inner sense. You may relax outwardly, you may rejoice, you may telephone a friend, you may sit quietly and feel the gladness in your chest. But inwardly, you must remain exactly the soul who assumed the same calm, the same settledness, the same quiet sense of course this has happened, for I am the soul who has it. No surprise, no disbelief, no anxious holding. The very same inner posture in which you went to sleep the night before, when the outer world still showed nothing. The inner posture must not change, because the outer world has changed. The outer world is the mirror. You are the figure standing before the mirror. If you change posture, the mirror changes posture. Hold yours. The third is this: the only sustainable possession of any outer thing is the inner state from which it flows. You cannot, in the long run, possess what you have not become. You may receive what you have not become, briefly. The world will hand it to you as the obedient mirror of an inner state you held for a season, but you cannot keep it. The moment you slip back to the state that did not have it, the world cannot keep handing it to you. The world is not generous. The world is exact. It gives what is impressed and withdraws what is no longer impressed. Therefore, the soul who wishes to keep what they manifest must become, in some real and permanent way, the soul who naturally has such a thing. Not the soul who is anxious about having received it, not the soul who is desperately holding it, the soul to whom such a thing is now simply home. That is the only sustainable possession. Everything else slips. Let me tell you of a gentleman I knew in 1948. Thomas was his name. A businessman in Los Angeles, perhaps 45 years old, who had assumed for nearly a year the recovery of a particular business that had been failing for some time. He did the inner work patiently. He felt the wish fulfilled. He went to sleep, night after night, in the warmth of a thriving enterprise, calm and settled, the work running of its own quiet momentum. And in the spring of that year, my friends, the business indeed turned. A large contract appeared almost without warning. The cash flow recovered. By the autumn, the firm was the strongest it had been in 5 years. Within 18 months, Thomas wrote to me in some distress. The business had begun to fail again. Not catastrophically, but the contract had not renewed. 2 key clients had drifted. The old patterns of trouble had begun to reassert themselves. He could not understand. The law had given him everything. Why was it being withdrawn? I asked him the same question I had asked Catherine. I said, Thomas, on the morning after the contract first arrived, what did you feel when you woke? He thought. He said, I felt enormous relief. I felt as though I could finally breathe again. I felt that the long danger had passed. I felt that I could at last begin to enjoy the business after so many years of struggle. I said, Thomas, and during the year that followed, did you continue the inner work? Did you continue to feel, before sleep each night, the warmth of the thriving enterprise, the calm, settled certainty that all was well? He looked at me with a slow recognition. He said, Mr. Goddard, I did not. I stopped. I thought the work was over. And there again, my friends, was the entire matter. Thomas had built, over a long year of assumption, the inner state of a settled and thriving businessman. The world had at last mirrored that state. And the very morning the mirroring began, Thomas had laid down the work that built it. He had gone back to running the firm in the old anxious way, paying attention to the contracts, the clients, the cash flow, as though those were the substance and the inner state were the mere decoration. He had reversed the order. He had treated the effects as the cause. And the law, which can do nothing but mirror what is held within, slowly withdrew its support because the inner state was no longer being held. I told Thomas to begin again, to return to the nightly practice, to go to sleep each evening in the warmth of the thriving enterprise, not as a man trying to recover what was slipping, but as a man who has it and has always had it, and who is at perfect peace concerning it. To rebuild the state, and to never again, not for one evening, lay it down. Within 7 months, the business had recovered. He held it, this time, for the rest of his working life, because he had at last understood that the inner work is not a thing one finishes. It is a thing one inhabits, like a house one has chosen to live in for the remainder of one's days. Now let me give you the practice plainly, so that you may begin tonight, whether you are awaiting a manifestation, or holding one that has just arrived, or mourning one that has slipped from your hands. If you are awaiting a manifestation, continue the inner work. Go to sleep each night in the warmth of the wish fulfilled. But begin now, while you wait, to develop the habit of remaining in that warmth in the morning. Wake gently. Pause a moment before you rise. Re-enter the warmth in which you fell asleep. Carry it with you into the kitchen, into the small tasks of the morning. Practice now, before the manifestation arrives, the very stance you will need on the morning after it arrives. Build the habit of continuance. The aspirant who has practiced continuance for months before the manifestation arrives will not slip when it arrives. He will simply continue, and in continuing, he will hold. If you are holding a manifestation that has just arrived, do not relax inwardly. Outwardly rejoice if you wish, but within yourself remain exactly the soul who assumed the same calm, the same settledness, the same quiet, of course. Tonight before sleep, do precisely what you did the night before the manifestation arrived. Go to sleep in the warmth of the wish fulfilled, exactly as though it had not yet arrived. The fire that built it must continue to be tended. Tend it. The manifestation will deepen rather than slip. If you are mourning a manifestation that has slipped from your hands, do not despair. The law has not taken it back. You returned in some quiet moment after its arrival to the older state, and the world followed you. Return now to the building work. Rebuild the inner state. Go to sleep tonight in the warmth of the wish fulfilled, as though the slipping had never occurred. Do not strain. Do not try to summon back the thing through any new technique. Simply rebuild the state. With the same patience you built it the first time, the world will rebuild itself to match. And this time, for you have learned, you will not slip when it returns. Now, my friends, let me lift this teaching to its highest level before we close. There is a great mystery here, and the world does not see it. We have been taught all our lives that the outer event is the prize, and that the inner work, if we do it at all, is the means by which we win the prize. But this is the order reversed, my friends. This is the world as it appears, not the world as it is. The truth is the very opposite. The new state of consciousness is the prize. The outer event is only the visible signature, the obedient mirror, the natural and inevitable echo of the inner state having been built. The state is the substance. The event is the shadow. And once you understand this, my friends, your whole relationship to the law changes. You no longer rush through the inner work in the hope of reaching the outer event. You linger in the inner work, because the inner work is the having. The outer event will follow surely, almost as an afterthought, in its own time. But the prize you were seeking is already in your hands. In the very moment you enter the state, you are the soul who has. You have been the soul who has since the night you first sincerely assumed the wish. The world will catch up. But you are not waiting for the world. You are already home. Therefore, when the world at last catches up, when the call comes, the offer is made, the lover returns, the door opens, do not mistake the world catching up for the moment you began having. You began having months ago, on the first night you went to sleep, in the warmth of the wish fulfilled. The world is only now expressing what you have already been. And because you have already been, you must continue to be. The world will continue to express what you continue to be. That is the whole secret of holding a manifestation, my friends. Continue to be the soul you have already become. Remember the soul in this great city tonight, sitting at his kitchen table in the dimming light, mourning the offer that came and was withdrawn. He has not lost the law. He has only forgotten that the inner work is not a thing one finishes. He laid the fire down. The fire went out. The world grew cold around him. But the fire is his to relight. He may relight it this very night. He may go to sleep tonight in the warmth of the offer fulfilled, exactly as he did in the months of assuming, and he may continue, this time, to tend the fire even after the offer returns. And when it returns, for it will return, he will hold it. The heartbreak need not happen twice. Be that soul tonight, my friends. Whatever your wish, whatever your stage of the work, do not lay the fire down. The inner state is not a means to the outer event. It is the very substance of which the event is the shadow. Tend the fire. Hold the state. Let the world catch up in its own quiet time. And when it does, do not relax. Do not change posture. Do not slip back into the older state of the soul who did not have it. Remain the soul who assumed. Remain home. The world is your obedient mirror, my friends. Give it nothing to mirror but the soul you have already become, and watch what stays. Good evening, my friends. I shall see you again in the next